Welcome, Iga's Army of the Night, to the Bloodstained community broadcast. I'm your host, Zombie Mike, and with me, as we do every Halloween, we have Ben Judd with us. Ben Judd in the house. How are you doing?
Ben Judd is awake. I don't think I can do my traditional Halloween werewolf.
No werewolf howls? Well, that's fine.
Because
we still...
it's early. Maybe a chicken.
We both wore our Halloween costumes. All right, yes, the Halloween chicken.
A were-chicken.
The were-chicken, yeah. Ben's dressed as a were-chicken. I am traditionally a vampire, so good evening, ladies and gentlemen. All right, so it's been a while since we've talked about, a whole year, as we do this every October and get together. What's been new with you, Ben?
So obviously, as I mentioned last time, we have the indie publishing thing with Dangan, and that has continued to pick up speed. We've gotten more and more fans over the last year, which is great. Being able to publish more and more games, which is also really exciting to work with so many different passionate creators, indie creators. The DDM stuff, my main job. I don't know. Many of you may have seen Sekiro being announced. That was a title that I worked on. There's a couple other really amazing ones that are probably going to be announced over the next year. Very exciting. And I am trying to push the metaphorical boulder up the hill to get a few more old school retro games greenlit so that there are potential HD remakes or new versions of said titles. So continuing to do what I love, very, very fortunate to be able to do that. But then separate from that on the side, and we need to definitely dedicate at least 2 or 3 minutes about it, I have been getting into premium core board gaming. Don't worry, I still play video games, but been getting into premium core board gaming as well, and that's been a whole lot of fun.
Now, when you say premium core board gaming, do you mean games like Dixit and Takanoto, or like what kind of games do you play on board games?
Probably the most the easiest one to reference is going to be a game called Gloomhaven, which was a Kickstarted board game, but is been now released on Amazon and is gotten more, I think, mainstream release, distribution, etc. It traditionally, I think, is about a $200, maybe $250 game. But When it was on its Kickstarter, you could get it for $100. Really interesting, long campaign. Basically, you could play it for 50 to 100 hours sort of board game. So different than your traditional Clue or Monopoly or whatever. Although, some people could argue you could play Monopoly for 100 hours if you wanted to.
Yeah. Well, I have a pretty great collection of newer board games that I really enjoy playing with friends. Resistance is my favorite, but Gloom, I think I've heard of that, but
Gloomhaven, Gloomhaven. So there's a website called BoardGameGeek.com, and I think Gloomhaven is currently rated #1, or it's certainly in the top 10.
Well, we will definitely have to check that out. That sounds like quite a bit of monetary investment for a board game, but if you're doing it with multiple families or something, maybe everybody can kind of pitch in.
That's right. Well, the one I'm going to talk about later, when you give me my proper 3 minutes on the soapbox, is actually a more expensive game than that. So, anyways, we'll jump into that later.
Sure.
That's currently what I'm doing.
Awesome. So, just in case someone's new to the show and maybe a new Bloodstained fan, how about recapping how you've been involved from the start with Bloodstained, and maybe just give a little introduction about hey, new person that's never heard of Bloodstained before, this is what it is.
Okay. Hey, new person who's never heard of Bloodstained before. Bloodstained is a spiritual successor to the Castlevania series. So basically, it's a semi-open world Igavania. You go to different rooms, eventually get new powers that open up new branching paths as you explore a very large Gothic castle sort of area. It was originally a pitch that Iga had created when he went independent from Konami. And he pitched to multiple different publishers. None of them said they wanted to move forward with it. So we did a Kickstarter campaign. We're able to raise 5.5 million, tons of different modes, tons of different new ideas. Basically, he was something that was really empowering the creator. Iga was able to do everything that he wanted to do. And so for anybody who's been craving that sort of 2D, 2.5D, Igavania exploratory, unlocking different parts of the castle Gothic visual sort of style of game, this is really putting Iga in the position to be able to do that and really experiment, do some interesting things with it. So I helped Iga as his agent. I also helped produce some of the Kickstarter campaign. I'm not directly affiliated with the team, i.e. I'm not sitting there day to day doing things, but as a video game agent, for people who don't know what that is, basically I use my network to connect publishers to developers, developers to other developers, sometimes publishers or developers to places like art houses, translation houses, testing houses, et cetera, and just try to make sure that they have all the pieces they need to make the game that they want to make. Most commonly, the biggest piece is the funding piece. But as you've seen, one of my clients, Platinum Games, has constantly mentioned wanting to do self-publishing. Some bigger developers have been able to accumulate enough capital that they're able to fund and publish their own game, which I think, again, is very exciting. It's very empowering. I've heard many creators talk about how frustrated they were that a publisher is forcing them to add a mode or forcing them to do something because data is suggesting that this sort of gameplay is what's popular. I mean, it's not a real world example, but I can certainly envision a major AAA independent studio trying to pitch a major publisher some kind of a game, and then that publisher saying, this must have a battle royal mode because Fortnite is making so much money, which is quite honestly nonsense, because you're chasing the trend rather than creating the trend. And the most powerful thing in the game industry is to be able to create the trend rather than chase it. So basically self-published or self-funded developers, independent developers, are going to be able to avoid all that nonsense. And if they want to make a first-person storytelling game, or if they want to make a dating sim puzzle game or whatever, they're free to do that. And that's what's going to create the most creative, interesting, non-corporate sort of experiences. So it's going to be a brave new world. And the hopes are that Iga will have a mega hit with this, with Bloodstained, and eventually he'll be able to do more and more of whatever he wants to do.
Yeah.
So there you go.
And we all want to see that happen. So you mentioned Platinum Games. Now that's the company that Playism was part of. Is that correct?
Nope. Totally unrelated. Yep.
Oh, okay.
Playism is a brand of a company called AGM, Active Gaming Media.
Okay, that's who I was thinking of. The Playism guys, they Dan and Nyan, they used to do the old Bloodstained podcast, which inspired this to continue, where you guys left off. And I think it's great that those guys have formed Dangan with you. So
yep.
How did all of that come about, and how are those guys doing?
So as an agent, I have to be very careful what information I impart and what information I don't impart. Let's just say this. We ended up collaborating together because we had the same morals and ethics about what we felt quality needed to represent and what we felt an indie publisher needed to do for an indie developer, i.e., to really make them feel part of a family, to make sure that we weren't being overly greedy, to make sure that we were dedicating the right amount of time for said indie developer. And where they were working before, they didn't feel that their ethics or morals lined up 100% with that corporate culture, which happens a lot. There are certain times when I worked at Capcom where I totally disagreed with what the higher ups had decided. And there were certain times where I totally agreed. But, the only thing you can do as an individual, if you disagree with the place you're working at, is you can quit. And then you can either find a place that syncs up more aptly with what you want to do, or you can create that. And since we hadn't seen any indie publisher that was doing what we really wanted to do, we got together and we said, let's do this. Let's create a new label, a new publisher that stands for all the things that we value.
That's good. I wish you guys the best of success. All three of you is somebody I will always have my eyes on, and now seeing that you're all still together is pretty cool. So yeah, a lot can change with companies and the way things are laid out. The team for the Kickstarter has changed quite a bit. You had Inti, you had Deep Silver, Armature, Playism. They've all kind of been, swapped along the way, and most of these have all been viewed as positive and understandable. But there's certainly a professional, courteous curtain of privacy for the details on each one of these change. But is that kind of normal in the indie space, or just the industry as a whole? What do you think about the moving pieces with Bloodstained from where it came from a Kickstarter where it is now?
Right. I think that traditionally it's rare to swap different companies a lot along the way. But I think that it really depends on whether it's going to be a plus or a minus. Like if you have a company that doesn't fit what you need, it's much better to get rid of it sooner than later, or rather to tag in somebody else who has that ability, rather than to be locked in to working with somebody who it's not going to work. And Hollywood is very good at doing that, right? They'll drop a director or producer or a production company from a major IP if they feel that they're not giving them what they needed. And again, sometimes that can be viewed as a plus, and sometimes that can be viewed as a minus. I know the whole James Gunn debate is probably something that still a lot of Marvel aficionados are constantly discussing. But in the three cases that you mentioned, number one, there was Inti Creates, and they were, initially. It's important to note that a lot of the key art and core design from that side of things did come out of a collaboration from them. So they're
Absolutely.
still, without Inti Creates, there would not be Bloodstained. There's no doubt about it. Number one. Number two, they were more shifted to the pixel side of things with Curse of the Moon, which ended up being great, right? That was a fantastic game. I have tons of friends who weren't necessarily interested in Bloodstained that played that game and are just like, oh my gosh, it's so great. It's like perfect for speedrunners and everything. So that happened to be a really great choice to have them focus in that area. Whereas, a mastery of Unreal Engine 4, I think that there were maybe better companies that had more experience in that area. So that happened to be a really good choice. As far as the shifting of publishers, obviously Deep Silver was purchased recently by THQ Nordic. Who knows how that would have changed things. We've obviously heard that they're working on Shenmue 3. Maybe that would have been a bad thing if they were working on 2 Kickstarters and there's this acquisition talk. Who knows what sort of focus they would have gotten. But without a doubt, and Iga will say much the same thing, 505 has been an incredible partner to work with. They have been incredibly flexible. Obviously, game design, a lot of it is you're building art, and so nobody knows when they're starting to paint something exactly how long it's going to take to do the painting. There's a creative gray zone that's in there, and it's the thing that most publishers dislike the most, because they're the ones that are oftentimes funding the project. And so 505 has been very flexible, giving Iga the space he needed in many situations to do everything he needs to do. So that I am 100% sure was a great choice, and I'm super thankful to everybody on that end. And then finally, the Playism piece, they were initially slated to be a part of even the publishing process. But they came in and they said partway through, nope, this is too much financial risk, so we're going to have to fade out. So that was, again, not, as an agent, you never want to have somebody say, hey, we're going to be a part of this, and then drop out and then leave you in a point where you have to find more finances. It happens. Sometimes you're able to cover that with internal dollars. Sometimes you have to find other ways to find the money. So that was a frustrating twist of events. But I'm quite sure it simplified things, because rather than one publisher, you had 2 or 3 publishers, and now that it's back down to 1, which is the way it should be. So maybe from the outside in, all of those could be something that could create anxiety and make people think, oh no, the game's going off the rails. But in fact, all of those, in hindsight, have been very, very smart choices, I think, for the production.
Right, and the whole Deep Silver and Plasm thing that changed so early on in the process, just after the Kickstarter. Really, only Inti Creates had really kind of pushed a lot of work into Bloodstained at that point, and we still get the benefits from it, because the character design for Miriam has been amazing, and all of that art really came from them. Some of the sample music from Ippo Yamada sounded awesome. I really hope that stuff still makes it in. But I think that the whole tone and what we got from the side game, it's really awesome. So I'm pleased with all of the changes that have happened along the way. But it's been an interesting journey over these 3 years now. So all right,
Mike, a lot can change in the game industry in 3 years, and you're going to see in the next 2 years even more. The next 2 years is going to be equivalent to the last 10 years. So get ready for a wild ride in the game industry.
You're always dropping truth bombs on the show, and people are already when I announce that you're going to be on the show again, they have their bomb shelters ready. So that sounds a little apocalyptic. People don't like change, and quick change that could be comparable to a whole decade in the industry. What do you see on the horizon here?
It'll be
Can
good.
You give us any hints?
The only hint I'm going to give you is, when I was a kid, if we ever wanted to rent a video game or a movie, we went into Blockbuster Video, and we had to pay ridiculous late fees if we forgot that we didn't return the movie in time, yada, yada, yada. Now I don't have to worry about that. But you know what? I don't miss it. So these changes will not be apocalyptic. These changes will be convenient. They'll create more options. And largely, there should be a lot more content in the future that caters to a lot of different game genres and play styles. So right now, there's the indie apocalypse, because Steam is terrible for curation. The Switch, which was hailed as the machine that's going to save all the indies, that's also, they're not doing any curation, so that's terrible. Discoverability curation is going to be the key, I think, for the future. But excuse me, there are going to be a ton of more options, and it's going to be so great for the consumer. So just know this, that in 2 years, it'll be better, much better than what it is even now.
Yeah, there's so many great games out there that don't get the attention they deserve. And if there's a better way to push the cream of the crop to the top, I'll be there. I know there's a lot of people out there that really love physical media to collect when it comes to games. And with retro stuff especially, that's endearing. It's not anything that I've really been big on. I like my physical collection stuff, but I keep it kind of minimal. My rewards for Bloodstained are going to be awesome. They'll be like, on my little altar of Iga. So I'll collect that stuff. But the digital age has definitely brought gaming to a new era. And with the problems that we see from, the flood of trash games in the mobile market and on Steam, just the tiny little ones that they push out there. They're all based on search engine optimization and all that kind of stuff. That's playing a whole different kind of meta game, to where it's a game about making a copy paste game and just getting the money. We really need to see the next version, the next evolution of curated games in the indie space.
Absolutely. One of the things you say that's really interesting, the older I get, the more I truly believe there is a yin and yang. There is a pendulum that swings, and whether it's a social issue or whether it's a type of game purchasing positioning, it'll swing. The pendulum will swing too far in one direction, and then people realize, okay, we've gone too far, and then they'll course correct and go in the other direction. And then we'll go too far in that direction. And eventually it'll level out. But like a really good example is, with the growth of digital sales, that has then spawned more and more power for indie merch providers, limited run games, fantastic service. That's perfect. You don't have to have 5 million physical units, but you can now have the limited lot run of type of hardware, PlayStation 4, Switch, whatever. And then for those people who want the packaged version, who want to be a collector, those options exist as well. So again, I think as we swing in one direction, then that will give birth to new sort of business units, because there are going to be people that want the physical thing. And sorry to go back to the board game piece. One of the things I really like about these premium board games is that there's this physical piece to them. And the one that I talk about, the creator is just like, I am not going to do a digital version. I know that people may think that digital versions of board games are great because you get to like cut down on the setup time, but there is something that is special about the setup time. And there is something that's special about actually touching the pieces in your hand. And if you get rid of that and make everything digital, then you're going to lose some of the magic. So again, that's another yin and yang, I think, argument that occurs where it's like, oh, digital makes everything more convenient. I don't have to go to the store and buy it, all that great stuff. But then there's the other people that are like, oh, no, I really want the feeling of opening up a box and holding a manual in my hands and reading through the beautiful art. So I think those will always exist. There'll always be both options. I just think it'll be, a shift as far as where the revenue is larger.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's so true about games. I remember Hero Quest as a kid, getting those figures out and painting them, having the little screen in front of the guy running the monsters and setting up the dungeon, and having, players at the table all moving these pieces through. They made video games for that on like the Amiga and a couple of other systems. And, you just can't, it's just a totally different experience when you try to make something as tactile as that, an in-person experience there into a game. Some just don't translate well, and others do. But I'm totally with you on the balance on things like that. When it comes to the mobile space, there's a couple of games that I've been trying out that I like, but I've been involved in some of those that just kind of never end, and it's always wanting a microtransaction. And Castlevania has one of these mobile games that they're testing out in Japan now. I don't know if you've tried that. Have you given that a shot?
The Castlevania mobile game? No, I haven't. And that's merely there are two things that I think people don't like about mobile games. One is they don't like the monetization loops that are necessary to make them make money, and it just feels like greedy, and it feels like you're getting piecemealed on the game. And then the other thing is the touch controls. For me, I understand the monetization model. I really do. It's like saying, why are there casinos? Why is there gambling? Well, that's because people like that. But for me, it's the controls. I'm just through and through. I need to have a controller, a solid controller, and it needs to feel like I'm looking at a big screen, certainly with how bad my eyesight's gotten. And so those are the reasons why I don't really play a lot of mobile games.
Right. Yeah. Touch is amazing for what it does, like gem matching games and all that kind of stuff. Touch is a really interesting way to interact with a game, but there's that tactile control of, that precision that you need in like a fighting game or something that you just can't get with a touch screen. And I'm surprised that there isn't hardware out there that's actually really successful that you can just connect to a phone and control a game through tactile buttons like that. But
they've had MiFi controllers. When I was 5 years ago as an agent, they were talking like, this is going to change everything. You're going to be able to connect the controller straight to your Apple TV, and it's going to be amazing. But never really did much. So
Iga has done character design for Revolve 8, which is a mobile game. Were you involved in connecting him with that project?
Nope, that is all him. Those were some people he knew at Sega, and he seemed. I have a feeling if you're to the creative level of Iga's pedigree, that you really like doing one project is great, but there are certain times during the project where I think the creative piece becomes less and less important. It's more about the mass production of assets and stuff like that. So being able to have a second project like that to be able to put your energy into or your creativity into, I think is good for a lot of very talented creators. So when he mentioned that to me, I was super excited.
Yeah, I've only heard a few people say it, but there are some wondering about Iga's time being diverted for Bloodstained due to this. Do you think it's going to have any real effect?
Yeah, no. A lot of people, and quite honestly, even publishers try to, in contracts, lock down a person and say, hey, you have to work 100% on this. But I've had many of my clients who are EPs be like, well, listen, I'm head of the studio. I manage 4 projects at any given time. That's just what my role is. There's no way I can dedicate 100% to something. And quite honestly, if I did, it'd be an inefficient use of my time. So I think, there, once you've already planned out, the map of the castle, and Egan had already finished that, like over a year ago.
Hmm.
That's the most creative, challenging part, right? You're building the puzzle, and that's the magic behind an Igavania game. And then once you already know basically what most of the key characters are and all that, and I think Iga had written a lot of the scenario by that time. The director is fully able to run with it and then just do check-ins, and I think there is spare time to be able to do other projects,
Hmm.
depending on what part of the development phase you're in. But I can certainly say that Iga and Ida-san work very well. And I think even if Iga is doing something like a second project, he's probably just spending extra hours of the day and sleeping less hours to be able to do it if it ever got to
Sleeping
that
less
point.
hours. That man doesn't sleep anyway. From the last I heard, he only gets like 4 hours of sleep at night, and he's used to it. He prefers it that way.
Yep. Some people can do that. Not myself, but some people can.
Me neither.
Not us
Uh,
mere mortals.
I actually had the opportunity to eat dinner with Iga down in Austin when he went down there, and I got to meet him and Mana in person for the first time. And you could tell that the time switch from him traveling was really getting to him by the end of the night. But
Yeah.
but
Jet
yeah,
lag
yeah, it
gets
was
worse and
awesome.
worse the older you get, for sure.
Yeah, you're actually on this side of the ocean right now, so that's
After a
pretty cool.
week of work, so that's why I feel so chipper. My brain is actually functioning, unlike the previous year we've done this.
Yeah, this is Chipper Ben.
Hey,
It's so
scary.
so what got you into this into the board game thing? How did that happen?
So, the CEO of DDM,
Hmm.
like ran or runs a board game store, and so he's always like loved board games. And once a year, everybody from DDM gets together, and we do a retreat strategy session where we all plan. We all exchange information, talk about the trends we're seeing, how we can better service clients, how we could potentially expand the business, make it better quality, et cetera, et cetera. But it's also a really good team building. An agency works as a virtual studio. We don't really get to see each other unless we're like right in the middle of an event. And during events, you're just going on 120% all in full nitrous power. So you don't really get to enjoy time with your coworkers. And this allows us to do that. But on the last night of our retreat, we'd all gather at the CEO's house and we'd play board games. And he'd
Hmm.
introduce a few board games, and I started to like them quite a bit. And then one of my other clients from software, Miyazaki-san,
Hmm.
super genius creator there, he's a huge board game fan. And so I was like, I should probably focus a little bit on, learning what are cool board games. And I asked the CEO, and he said, listen, Gloomhaven's a good, more like standard, somewhat D&D-esque sort of rules or atmosphere, but it's got tons of really great miniatures. And that's what's really kicked off this new golden age of premium board games has been Kickstarter. Kickstarter basically allows you to um, create larger, more expensive board games that a traditional retailer would be afraid to carry because space-wise and cost-wise, it's too scary. But by basically doing a pre-order sort of system through Kickstarter, you're able to realize how many people are going to buy the game. And that allows you to create the right molds and all that in a cost efficient sort of way. But basically, he mentioned, Gloomhaven is a good one. But the one he mentioned that really, I'm just like, if I'm going to play one like really core game, what should it be? And he mentioned a game called Kingdom Death Monster. And I was like, okay, number one, that sounds just like comically generic as a name. And he's like, yeah, that's probably by design. But so I started doing research on the game. Little did I know that game is currently, as far as I know, the largest, most successful funded game in the game category at Kickstarter.
Oh, cool. I've actually seen it. I've seen a couple. They come with some really cool little miniatures. But
right.
So you mentioned From Software. Don't they have a board game that was kickstarted?
They do, but I think that's probably just like a quick license out thing. It may have gone through Bandai Namco and not From.
Okay, that's interesting. That they have that the CEO has the love of board games, but.
Well, I'm sure knowing the relationship between Bandai Namco and From, that they consulted and they said it, and I'm sure that Miyazaki-san probably said it was okay. But who knows? When you get to the point of licensing out, it's sometimes like the licensing out division, and one hand in a major publisher doesn't talk to the other hand. I've seen that happen quite a bit, but it ended up being a pretty good game for them, which is good. It's always nice to have your brand look good, no matter what sort of thing you license it out as. But right. Back to the Kingdom Death Monster thing really quickly. That raised $12.3 million.
Dang.
Almost $12.4 million. And so I'm like, oh, I have to see what this is about. And they did 2 Kickstarters. The first one, I think it was like, they were asking for like 300,000. They got like over $1 million or something. But people did it back then because the figures were so awesome, right? And the figures in King Death Monster are immaculate. They're gothic horror, they're beautiful, they're just some amazing character design. But what was interesting is when people then finally got their game fulfilled, they started to play the game and they're like, wow, this game is frigging awesome. And so word of mouth spread that, you may buy this game because you like the pretty figures, or you think that the quality of the whole experience is awesome. But in general, the gameplay is incredibly fun too. And so when they did a 1.5 version of that Kickstarter, it totally blew up. Little did I know, the guy who did this Kickstarter is a huge Iga fan.
No.
And at one point, he was going to send Iga a message saying like, I'm a big fan, good luck with your Kickstarter. But he apparently launched his second Kickstarter right after Bloodstained launched, or maybe it was right before it. But at any rate, they were basically going on at somewhat similar times, to the point where after his Kickstarter, got above 10 million, he's like, I'm going to seem like I'm some kind of an arrogant, smug jerk if I try to tell Iga, hey, congratulations with your Kickstarter. If mine's like ballooning and blowing up like this. And I'm sure neither Iga nor him expected their Kickstarters to do so well. But it's really cool that you have, little do probably each of them know that they have fans, of each other. And I was able to play Kingdom Death Monster with Iga. And he enjoyed it. So basically, both of these creators know about each other and they like each other, which is super cool.
Yeah, that is super cool. Have you ever played the card game Boss Monster?
I have not.
All right, it's not my most favorite game, but the premise behind it is it's a card-based game, and you set out castle rooms one after another, and at the end is the boss monster, which kind of represents you. And then there's a pool of adventurers in the village that you try to attract with your treasure in your castle or your dungeon, and then that lures them in. You try to kill them for points. So it sounds really awesome, but it doesn't play perfectly. But stuff like that has always made me wonder if I could make a board game for an Iga game, like an Igavania type game, what would it be? Because this is awesome. You're building a castle. You want it to kill people. You customize it. You have your bosses in it. I just think that there's got to be the perfect game for a castle building game, you know?
Well, you mentioned that it doesn't come off as well. It sounds like the premise is good, but the actual execution and the mechanics behind it aren't. And for Kingdom Death Monster, when I played it, as somebody who has been a producer and who has, worked with many people who have designed games, what I was feeling was, okay, this is an analog experience, but some of the systems that are in the game feel very much like deep video game systems. So it made it very easy for me to jump in and get really excited and understand the system. So I'm sure there is a world in which Iga could build an Iga board game, right, where he's designing the castle and you get different sort of loot and you have to go to a certain area to unlock, to get a certain item that will then unlock other parts of it, et cetera, et cetera. I'm sure that could be done. It just requires massive amounts of playtesting, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, if there's ever a Bloodstained board game, I'll be the first to buy it.
I'll be the second.
Yeah. All right. So we have lots of community questions and responses from the questions that you asked them. Did you want to wrap up any other conversation before we get into those questions?
I just, as one active piece, again, anybody who listens to this, if they could support Dangan being an indie publisher is never easy. It's not trying to figure out the right way to word it. It's really supporting smaller groups of people that need as much help as they can. And they're incredibly passionate. Many people are sacrificing their livelihood just for the sheer sake of wanting to create a game, being so passionate that they really, they really have to make this thing. And so for us, we're not a huge team either. We're working as best we can to make sure we get as much awareness. Our Twitter has gotten bigger and bigger over the last year, which is great. But anybody who wants to give us a follow at Dangan_ENT or wants to support any of the talented indie developers we work with by buying their games, I can say this. Many of the Western press have complimented us on having a very varied lineup, not too much, not too little, a wide variety of genres, and all of its high quality. So you won't go wrong, and certainly every indie developer that you help feed in this day and age could eventually bloom into, the next AAA creator that's making a game that you love 10, 20 years down the line.
Yeah, and we have a pretty active Discord community with Bloodstained, and Dangan also has a nice little Discord that's always active. People are always there. So if people want to jump in and get more involved with that Discord, I can link that on the forums for this podcast episode, or I could go look at the link for it, but who wants to type in a link, So maybe you could tweet out the link to the Discord more from the Dangan Twitter. That would be good too. So okay. But speaking about community questions, this Crocodile was actually he asked, "I'd like to learn a lot more about Dangan and what it's doing."
Yep.
So that's a pretty good segue in there. What are you guys currently focused on now?
So we have 4 pillars. Our pillars are creator collaboration. Any sort of creator we work with, we try to find a Japanese developer that they loved as a kid or that they are inspired by or want to work with. We try to make sure that that person can work with them. A good example is we've announced Devil Engine, which is a 2D shooter that has music by Hyakutaro, who did music for Thunder Force. The game itself gives you very strong Thunder Force vibes. And again, the best part is hopefully this turns into good news or media coverage, which would be nice. But even more than that is the fact that now Hyakutaro and the creator really talk to each other more, and they like each other, and they're both motivating each other. And so just seeing that, connecting 2 creators, one may be an older creator who hasn't done a lot of stuff as much as he used to in the past, and another one would be a new budding indie creator, but they're both basically invigorating and inspiring each other, and that's exciting to be a part of making that connection. So the creative collaboration piece is there. We have a a streaming piece where we have a person who used to be the main streamer at Twitch Japan. He connects to a lot of different streamers. We believe that if you sell a game, you can't just do one and done. You have to continue to stream it. You have to take it to events. You have to try and put it on Mixer, on Twitch, on YouTube, wherever you can. Inspire our translators. Many of the people at Dangan used to be translators. Some still are. And the thing that was incredibly frustrating is people would tell you what you could and couldn't do. Sometimes you would not even be able to get your name in the game, even though you'd spent months translating it. We believe that if you're going to take a game from the West and try to target the Japanese audience, or vice versa, or from any country to any other different language speaking country, you need to make sure that the translation is top notch. That is the doorway into understanding that content. So we offer revenue share based on certain sales targets to our external translators, which I haven't heard any other companies do. Matter of fact, a lot of companies use interns and basically squeeze them dry because they're cheap or free labor, and we won't do that. We're going to be honorable towards our translators. They're going to be a part of the team. Our contract insists that translators get their name in the credits. And so, that means that you usually have the best translators. And so far, the Japanese media has complimented us all the time on our Japanese translations, which is pretty awesome. And then finally, last but not least, we do a family style of communication. There are many indie publishers that will sign a deal, and once it's signed, they'll forget about it, or they will not intentionally publish it, or they will not communicate with that creator for like weeks upon weeks. And we create a channel on our Slack, and we share communication back and forth with that creator on a daily basis. And not only that, we try to tie them all into our lounge. So our lounge has some of the creators from Hollow Knight. I think maybe there's some of the people from Yacht Club Games. Anyways, the goal is just to have a community where anybody can talk about anything. They can geek out. They can ask questions. They can be like, hey, how did you solve this porting issue? Et cetera, et cetera. So we make sure somebody feels like they're a part of our family. And just give me 30 more seconds. One of my happiest moments was we were at TGS. Two of our teams came, made the trek to Japan. And one of the people there, one of the indie creators said, we were having a dinner, said, listen, when you guys first pitched me the idea of family, I was like, oh, that's so cheesy, and that's ridiculous. They're just saying it. It's like synergy. They're trying to come up with some bullshit marketing speak. And he's like, and seeing this right now, this dinner with all these different connected teams, he's like, I really do feel like a family. And I'm just like, oh my goodness, this feels so, so awesome to hear, because that was those were our ethical triggers, our moral triggers for wanting to build this company, and we're doing it. We're really doing it, and people are feeling it. So anyways, it's a long-winded way of saying that's who we are, and we will continue to publish some pretty awesome Japanese content. If people have not gotten a chance to play Visteria Saga, it's a free demo on Steam. I cannot officially say who is attached to it, but those of you who are sleuths and want to do the homework, I'm sure you'll be able to figure out who it is. It's a pretty awesome person, super smart creator. And we released Devil Engine as a demo as well. Over the next probably 6 to 9 months, we're going to release 5 to 6 titles, and many of them are going to be titles that we are being worldwide publishers on. So again, any support you have, feel free to join the Discord. Feel free to tweet at us, and we'll take any sort of advice that you can give us.
Yeah, it sounds like you already have a really close, friendly community on the creative side. So passionate fans will definitely be soon to follow. That's going to be amazing. I think that seeing you guys sprout from the seed into what you're going to become is going to be pretty exciting. So Crocodile also asks, how's Brave Earth Prologue coming along? I'm interested in other Dangan games, of course, but that one's the most on my radar, and I'm most looking forward to.
Yep. So that is Kyan. He was the original creator that made I Want to Be the Guy, which, as
Uh-huh.
people know, is like hard
Yeah.
as nails. Probably one of the first like truly indie games.
Hmm.
I want to say he's about 8 or 9 years into the development, and that may sound like crazy town, and quite honestly, it is crazy town. But there are lots of indie developers that have done that, that have dedicated. Owlboy was 10 years. Iconoclast, the other game we launched, was I think 7 or 8 years. If you make a game by yourself, prepare for it to take up to a decade. Should be like that should be your mental state,
Mm.
because it's a lot to do. There's a reason why team sizes get to be 250, 300 people when they're developing AAA titles.
Wow.
But anyways, he is continuing to truck along. I think he is a craftsman, which means until he gets everything perfectly, he is not going to release it. So from our perspective as a publisher, we're trying to nail down what a release might be, and we'll have an idea, and then all of a sudden it'll be like, oh no, I need to do this thing, or I need to do this other thing. Um, and so it would be nice to be able to release it quicker because there are obviously other fans that want to play it. But I have to say that one of the best parts about the indie development scene is they'll take as much time as they need to take. And Kyan really is going to make it the masterpiece it needs to be. You are not going to find a better Castlevania 3-esque experience that is that hard. That really reminds you of the old classics. So,
Well, it's definitely on my radar too now. So,
good.
yeah, best of luck with that project. All right, so Clystine asks, what do you think the Bloodstained team took away from the beta and its development process?
I know that they've constantly monitored everything. They have
Mm-hmm.
monitored the community. They've monitored the stuff that you're doing. Obviously, Mike, you've been a huge conduit for helping funnel all the right information to them. But ultimately, as soon as there were starting to be comments and all that, I know they've taken it all in. I know another thing is with 505 being a bigger organization, they're able to put producers that are looking at all the key comments and one of the most common ones. And again, taking that information, putting it into reports and sharing it with ArtPlay as well. So, doing a beta was awesome. It really allowed them to get a lot of feedback. The challenging thing is some of the issues, as with anything, will probably be fixed, and some of them may not be fixed because it depends on how deep-seated, the issue is. For example, if you fix one animation, and again, this is not towards any specific comment that I've read. This is just me giving a high-level, real-world example. If you fix one animation of a character, it may interact how that character's collision works with an enemy, and it may then break the code, and maybe it breaks, if it's like a main character or something, maybe it breaks the code for all the interactions. So there may be certain, what's the word I'm looking for, maybe certain parts of the current game that if they were to try to change them 100% based on feedback, then they'd pretty much have to reanimate everything from the ground up, or relight everything, or create new models and stuff, to the point where it wouldn't be real. You'd be looking at a launch 5 years down the line instead of sooner. So I think that's the answer. Is they are listening, they have the feedback. It sounds like it's incredibly invaluable, the negative and the positive, and they are going to fix what they can.
All right. So I think that, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think that you're pretty well known as being a Vita lover, that when you travel a lot, you always have it with you. Is that still the case these days?
So, on my trip coming to America, I'm like, I got my Switch. That's nice and all, but it doesn't have enough JRPGs. Nintendo or Japanese publishers, what the hell are you doing? Where is my Dragon Quest XI? Why is Persona 5, which was originally built as a PlayStation 3 game, not on Switch? You certainly have seen the numbers. You certainly have seen the install base. What are you doing? But anyways, I digress. I didn't have any of that, and I looked at my Vita, and I'm like, I should probably bring my Vita as well, before I realized that the battery was doomed. Basically, unless I have it plugged in,
Yeah.
the battery dies in like 10 minutes. So
Oh.
I'm like, I can't do that. But then I'm like, wait a second, what about my PSP Go?
Huh.
I bet that's got a few JRPGs on it. And I looked over, and sure enough, it did. So I was rocking the PSP Go on the flight over, playing some Final Fantasy IV after years.
Awesome. So the reason I ask about the Vita, Demiurgos asks, the Vita version was canceled 2 months after saying it was on track. What do you think the reasoning is behind the cancellation?
Again, this is only going to be my opinion, so please don't consider it gospel.
Mm-hmm.
But being an indie publisher myself, the second I see first party no longer support a console is the second that I no longer feel like there can be much interest. Now, that doesn't mean that the whole install base doesn't mean anything, but let's be honest. If the people that are making it and manufacturing it are pretty much cutting it loose, well then, that is a major red flag. That means you're not going to get the sort of support that you really need to, maybe on the storefronts, maybe on the blog, maybe on other things that you really need to hit to be able to make that version pay out. And quite honestly, just because you have the base code and you're going multi-platform doesn't mean that every version is now cheap as hell. There are costs. And actually, even in Japan, there are submission costs that come with just doing a different version. And so if you're unable to raise the right amount of money because people are buying that game on Switch instead of Vita, well, then it doesn't make a lot of sense as a business goal. I have a friend who is making a small indie title, and he probably about 8 months ago was like, I already bought my Wii U dev kit. It was very expensive. I should just release the Wii U version of it. And I'm like, don't do it. He's like, but I already bought the dev kit, man. And I'm like, yeah, I know. And it was expensive, and it sucks that the timing is off because right now the Switch is blowing up and people that are playing Wii U are probably few and far between. But the problem is the amount of money you're going to spend on porting, on submitting, and then releasing it. You probably will not make, certainly as an indie game, that money back. So it's best that you have a shot of whiskey or tequila or whatever. You lament the fact that you have this expensive Wii U dev kit that you're not going to be able to do anything with, but that you accept the fact that people have moved on to the Switch and other hardware. And again, I have a Vita. I love it, but unless that Vita is plugged into the wall, I can't use it. That's how old that hardware has gotten. And since there's not going to be new hardware manufactured, there may be even more and more people that have that technical issue. So taking all of that combined as a strategy, I would say, doesn't mean that people who have a Vita aren't valuable. They truly are valuable. It just means that, we've moved on from diesel cars to unleaded cars, or eventually battery cars, or, that's just how technology works.
Yeah, and well, I think the Vita being canceled is a pretty more severe wound than, like, let's say when Wii U switched over to Switch, because there was something next to get out of that. But as far as funding is concerned, as Kickstarter backers, people who love their Vita love it so much, and they're really looking forward to that. And then, they had already put the money up front to reach the stretch goal to fund everything for the Vita. So from their perspective, it's like, if Vita still exists, why isn't this getting made? Because we gave you the money to do it. But
yep. I understand that piece. I don't know personally if that money maybe is better served into making the game higher quality. Maybe it's better served in the fact that it would look better on the platforms. All of those issues are open question marks. We don't know. But I do know that I think there was a chance to get refunds for people who had bought the Vita, or whether they could switch over or get a refund. So as far as I know, Iga was trying to allow people that were just only owned a Vita, right? Which I'm sure of all the people that funded the game, there may be a few, but I'm sure it's less than 100 people for sure. But giving them that option, because that's all you can really do. I've seen many Kickstarters take people's money and then not make anything and not give them any refund. So I'm glad at least Iga is making sure that everybody is getting the opportunity to switch into other hardware or get refunded. But of course, it's never fun when you have to make a financial decision, or maybe a technology-based one. I can't really say, to cut out a certain part of the demographic, because you want to get as many people in there as possible. But if it's to the point where it's going to ruin the production or create a minus, then I would hope even people who are fans of the Vita would realize that there is a greater good, that there is the empowering the creator to make more and more of these Bloodstained games in the future. That's the end goal. That's going to be something where, maybe you don't get it on the Vita and you have to get it on some other piece of hardware for now, which isn't ideal, but maybe you'll be able to get a Bloodstained 2 or a 3, and then that's the ideal scenario.
Yeah. Well, and, the Switch is portable. You said, you were looking for more games on it, and you're ready to put your PS Vita plugged up to the wall, and that's where it'll live forever. But, Iga doesn't want to make decisions that lose fans or hurts his credibility. For those people that thought that he was being deceptive or whatever, that really sucks. But it all just comes down at the end of the day to a business decision that just has to be made. That's a no-brainer. That in a perfect world it wouldn't be like that. But there's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes that these complex things. From a consumer standpoint of I gave this money, I expected this thing, having that break, it sucks. But there's probably a lot more involved than we can just digest in one easy to hear thing that makes us feel all better. So,
well, I want to just very quickly to that point, Mike. I want to say that one of my hopes for the Kickstarter whole trend and phenomena was I was hoping that the end consumer would learn more about the challenges and have more realistic expectations about what game development is all about. Myself as a producer, I can certainly say it's not as simple as you make a plan, you have a blueprint, and then you have a house built in 1 year. It is certainly not like that. There's a lot of guesswork. There's a lot of hard decisions where you decide, I can either spend another month on trying to create this key design concept, which may make the game so much fun, or I can just say, no, I don't have that time budgeted, so let's just make what we're going to make, and may end up with a pretty boring game. And so those are the sort of decisions that happen all the time. I don't think that there probably is anything that can be said to a Vita fan, because they're going to say, I want my Vita game, which again, I totally understand. But much to your point, there are many complicated connective pieces to making a game. And I know a lot of different creators. Some creators have huge egos. Some of them are incredibly hard to work with. Iga is about as close to an everyman that you'll ever find. And he's incredibly, incredibly kind. And I know that every time he's unable to live up to even a single fan's expectations, it mentally makes him feel makes him feel anxiety, makes him feel sad. He really does want to do everything that he can. But in the real world, I wish I could eat pizza and not get fat, but that's just not how the real world is. So
well,
just
one
any...
thing you said... One thing you said about how you wanted part of the process of the Kickstarter is to give people more of a window into seeing how things work on decisions like that. And I think I think that's an opportunity lost here, because whether it was Iga's communication or perhaps someone that's more in charge of how communication flows to the backers and the public, one of the things that was perceived here by these Vita owners is that they're told up until 2 months before, for so long they were told Vita's fine, don't worry about Vita, everything's still going fine, and then all of a sudden, snap, that just doesn't seem, it doesn't seem like we met that opportunity to learn more about more about the complex scenario behind it, and communicate it in a way that was just a little bit more just transparent, I guess. Is a good word. Yeah.
Yep. And I don't know again whether it was I don't know what the timeline was for Sony saying we're not going to support Vita anymore versus that decision. I don't know if it's a decision that's been in the making for 6 months, or whether it really was a, look at the hard numbers and they were doing it on a quarterly basis or something. I really don't know. But certainly it's in the future for that learning. Everybody wants to know sooner, and believe it or not, publishers want to know sooner. But I do think that there is the ideal view of what people want, and then there's the realistic view of what happens. And I think that somewhere in the middle is where the truth lies, is where you have to be as a publisher. And so, or rather even as a creator. So a very good example is, idealistically, I wanted people to look at Kickstarter games. I wanted them to see that as you add more content, it increases the schedule, and that actually to make a game, it's going to cost on multi-platform more than $2 million for sure. And to realize that fulfillment for Kickstarter games takes a lot of the money out of it. I wanted people to have a solid grasp of that. But a lot of times what I've seen on other Kickstarters eventually people get very upset, and then mob mentality takes over. And then what used to be a really supportive, enthusiastic community turns into a really negative one that's very toxic. And so I think there is a balance between how you connect with your end users. But IGA has done a great job, I think, in general, not perfect, of trying to listen, of trying to make sure there's information out there, which a lot of other Kickstarters haven't. And that makes it easier to become toxic. But then, again, much credit to you, people like you and all the people at the Bloodstained forums have also been very good at conveying information to IGA, to conveying information to the fans. People without information, the unknown is the scariest thing that's out there. And so the fact that you're able to do that, I think has helped a lot. But
yeah, our community is anything but toxic. Sure, there are people that want to know the release date, and there are people that have been disappointed by some delays and the Vita cancellation. There's been things that, after these 3 years, things have happened that weren't exactly positive, but the community has always, as a whole, been pretty positive. And those that haven't, they're just not around anymore, because they've lost their interest, or they've just become that kind of soured person that were probably like that before they really got in. But everyone's listening to, we're not an echo chamber. We listen to everything that's happened, so we're realistic, but we're not toxic at all. So
which is great. It's amazing. You've built something in the modern internet which should be truly cherished, because it's not easy. It's absolutely not easy.
Well, I mean, it's IGA's fans. I'm just a facilitator. So speaking of those fans, Redogan has a few questions. He wants to know how you feel about Bloodstained's development.
I recently went over there, was it probably about 3 weeks ago, and IGA got to show me a few of the hidden things. It wouldn't be a good IGA game without some of the secrets.
Right.
I like the enemies. I think the animations have gotten better for sure. The lighting, I think, needs some more work. We'll have to see, but I know internally I've got a few people working on that. Some of the secrets are freaking awesome. And a few of the bosses that Iga showed me, just like through and through, design, challenge, all that, like, people are going to die a lot. You're going to have to be like Ben Judd and Turtle and level up and get to a point where you can beat some of these enemies. Because, man, I'm just like, that's hard. That's really hard, but very cool.
Yeah, well, a lot of people
looking forward to it.
A lot of people want it to be harder than Symphony, and I know Symphony has kind of been IGA's goal for difficulty. That's what I've heard him say in interviews. So it is good to see, though, that some people will find it challenging. I thought the Zangetsu fight in the backer demo was nice and challenging. Everything to that point maybe a bit easy, but yeah, it's an IGA game, so you can grow as much as you need to complete it.
So here's the thing. The basic enemies and how hard those are versus, and how many of them there are versus the boss difficulty those I think are going to be different things. And Ego wasn't doing a playthrough for the whole thing. He was just showing me certain pieces they had done, new backgrounds, whatever. But the bosses that he showed me, I'm just like, this is going to whip my butt over and over and over and over again. So they seemed, again, and I mean, it's got different parameters, so you may be stronger or weaker depending on when you get there. It seems like it was a hell of a lot harder than anything I had played in Symphony of the Night.
Interesting. All right. So how do you feel about the delay in 2019?
I mean, obviously, I want it sooner than later. I do think that we're talking about a ton of modes, online instantly adds, another year, whatever. I think that's a common thing that happens with Kickstarter is that Kickstarter forces you to set a release date. And then as you create new stretch goals, which sometimes are thought out based on people's opinions and feedback during that month of doing the Kickstarter, you end up adding more content, but you can't ever change the end date, which is, hey, I'm going to build a 100 piece Lego set. No, now you're going to be able to add all these extras, and it's actually a 500 piece Lego set. But I want you to build it within the time you're going to build a 100 piece Lego set. Well, that's just nonsense. It's not realistic. And there's no way of like, oh, well, then you should just hire more people and move it faster. Well, that doesn't work either. You'd have to basically overlap people's duties to the point where you're actually spending 3 times, 4 times as much to be able to get, that additional 25% speed boost. And so that can't work budgetary wise either. So I think that anytime now when I kickstart something, I look at it like a second Christmas. I'm not going to bet that it's going to come out anywhere near when it's said. But if it comes to me, and sometimes it'll come to me and I've forgotten I've even kickstarted it, then it's like, oh, wow, second Christmas. This is nice. I get some random present in the email. Or in the mail. I totally forgot that this was coming. So that's how I look at Kickstarters. But again, we all want to get games sooner than we want later. We've always felt that way since we've been kids. But I just think that is the nature of the beast.
Yeah, very true. I think a lot of the frustration with the release date stuff now is that there's no window. It's just 2019, Yep. And not being able to give any kind of time frame there is what I hear the most about. They don't understand. They don't understand why they can't get a window that fits within a year when it was supposed to be this year. So
I'll give you one very real world example. I have no idea whether it relates to Bloodstained or not. If you list a date, or if you share release information with like an Amazon or a major online retailer, and they put it out, and you start spending marketing dollars towards that, even if there's a slip of a week, it ruins everything. And sometimes if an online retailer says a certain date based on information, and then they have to change it, sometimes there are penalties that come in as well, because they will have slotted in another game or another item for the week after, and now you're going head to head with it, and it's going to compete for retail space. There's lots of different, again, connections to why you do not want to firmly announce a date without knowing 100% exactly where it's going to be. And so I think what I saw with Mighty Number 9, they announced a date and they pushed it back, they announced a date and pushed it back, and they did it like 3 or 4 times, to the point where that created a ton of animosity and anxiety and just not disbelief of whether that date was the real date or not. What I think is best that they're doing right now is making sure they have a concrete, absolute solid date before they're going to announce it. And again, that's frustrating. Is that Q1? Is that Q4? Is that Q2? Nobody knows at this point. But I'm sure when they get to the point where they're absolutely confident that they have that exact date, you're going to get it. I'm quite sure that it's not going to be like December next year. So I don't think it's pessimistic. People are going to, of course, say that and be sarcastic, but I don't think we're looking at that date. I think it's going to be sooner than that.
Yeah, I do too. I hear a lot of people joke like 2028, that we'll get the game, but yeah, you came up with some really good reasons about how important it is not to miss the date when advertising starts going on and shelf space is starting to be reserved and all that good stuff. But a silly question, why doesn't Iga just explain that to everybody?
I don't know. That could be. Maybe that's not the reason in this case. Maybe there's a strategy which is, hey, we're afraid that people will misinterpret this, and then there may be a mob mentality thing, and there could be a meltdown. It could create bad PR. Nobody wants bad PR on a game. It could be that there's a disagreement between the publisher and developer on what the strategy is. There could be one of 10,000 different reasons.
Right.
I don't know.
And we can invent them all day, but just hearing Iga address it to a detail that has some logic behind it might help assuage some of those concerns from people who are like, why can't we get a window for next year? But
I do know when I've seen other publishers in this same scenario, most publishers do not reveal that.
Mm-hmm.
And most consumers always want to know.
Yeah.
So
of course we want to know.
That is the push pull that happens between what may be the idealism and the realistic or the reality.
Right.
But I don't know. I think all you can do as fans and as backers is to say, Iga, even without giving us a specific release date, can you give us a couple reasons as to what the why is?
Yeah. Yeah, right. Because with backers, we've had our eyes on this project before it was even fully conceived. Before they had got their hands dirty with making the game. So we've been looking at it for a long time. But let's move on with other questions. Redigan also wants to know, Ben, do you feel still excited and confident for the game post beta backer demo?
Absolutely. I'm going to get the game on Switch. I like Igavania games. I loved Hollow Knight. I will continue to love those sort of games. They are right up my alley. I don't like FPS. If the world becomes tons of FPS and I don't get to play any like exploratory Igavania type games, I'm going to feel very disappointed. So being able to have one with a bigger budget, with the guy who's made 7 of these games in the past, all of that is right up my alley. So I'm super excited for it.
Awesome. So Incaria asks, we got mac and cheese in Bloodstained. Did you know?
I didn't, but that's awesome. I love mac and cheese. I can't get it in Japan quite as much as I could in America, but still, if I can get it in Bloodstained, I'll be happy.
Yeah. Do you know about the whole Iga finding mac and cheese over here? There's a picture of him being blown away.
That's right. Him eating mac and cheese, or like going nuts over it, and that created some phenomenon, and you guys pushed for it. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's great. Yeah, it's good to know it's there.
That's a perfect example of Iga listening to the backers in a way that I think is going to extend and make the gameplay even better.
Right. Encaria asked, does Dangan have plans to try to release anything on the PS Vita this year? After all of this that we just talked about.
For the record, we released Iconoclasts, which is a great game. If you haven't played it, go play it. We only publish in Japan, but it's still, the guy who made it's awesome. He worked with Way Forward on some stuff. Incredibly talented individual. Also got some really strong puzzle elements, some endearing story. That was released on Vita. So, and I want to say that was released in January. So we have officially released a Vita game this year.
Awesome.
Do we plan to release any other Vita games? Probably not, for much of the same reasons I mentioned before.
Right. Well, you've already got one under your belt, so I think that totally counts, man. Incaria also asks, is your voice in Bloodstained somewhere, perhaps as a scream?
Oh, that would be a great honor. Some of my friends at SNK, I help advise for SNK. They recently put me in King of Fighters 14.
Nice.
Even though I didn't really do anything on the creative side of things other than try to help them with more opportunities. But I was super honored to have that opportunity. If Iga ever says, Ben, I want your voice in it, I'm sure I totally would say yes.
Now, why would Iga have anything to say about King of Fighters?
No, it's got. I'm just saying I have been in other games
Oh,
in a
okay.
wide variety of ways, and so whether it's my voice or whether it's just as a special thanks or whatever, I'd be honored to be in Bloodstained's staff role. But as
So
far
in
as
King of
voice goes,
Fighters,
no official voice yet. No official voice work yet.
all right, all right. So we've already got the soundbite, by the way, of Iga torturing you and stretching you out on the rack during the Kickstarter campaign. So we've got the soundbite. We just got to put it in there somewhere. So where can we listen for you in King of Fighters? Do you know how you'll?
No. I'm not in there for any voice. I'm just saying I'm in the staff role. So sorry, my point is a bit diluted.
No, it's okay.
I have been attached to a wide variety of games of which I have either helped a lot or helped almost nothing.
Yeah, well, I just like seeing your name on the screen.
Being able
That's
to
awesome.
be a part of this. Well, so do I.
Yeah.
Egomaniac Ben Judd. Ladies and gentlemen.
Right. So Richter B has a few questions. What do you think of the new PS4 Spider-Man swinging mechanics compared to his work on Bionic Commando 2009?
Spider-Man swinging mechanics are awesome. Again, they went with the Activision Spider-Man 2 style, which we analyzed when we were making Bionic Commando, which was basically you can attach to anything, right?
Yeah.
You don't have to. You basically can attach to air or whatever, and that's fine. I think they use a little auto animating so that it attaches more to objects, but in general, so long as you're pressing the button rhythmically, you won't fall. You don't have to actually aim for anything. And so what that design is a design that's supposed to make swinging feel good as an animation, right? Not as a skill. With Bionic Commando, we made the active choice that you had to aim the cursor for what you were going to connect to, and you had to connect. It had to be your skill that was going to determine you were going to connect to the certain places. And at first, we had it so that there were no autocorrect. It was you 100% pinpoint had to connect to something in the 2 or 3 seconds you had the vertical swing going on. And I halfway through was like, listen, I am not an FPS gamer. I'm not good at the pinpoint accuracy that you guys are trying to put in the game. We need to have some sort of like an auto connector. And so they ended up, I think, making the Y-axis auto connect. So long as there was a point vertically along where you had moved your X-axis, your horizontal, then you would connect. So that was enough that there was skill. You had to make sure that to the right and left, you had put your cursor on something that vertically lined up with being able to connect to it. And then it would auto connect. And that made it feel so that you were in control of things, but you were still able to not, like, if you missed it by a little bit, like fall every time.
Right.
The whole goal for the Bionic Commando design was supposed to be what about when you shoot your bionic arm out and you miss, and there's that 2 seconds where you're like, oh damn, I'm falling. Throw out a Hail Mary and connect and save yourself and be like, yeah, that whole risk reward.
Yeah, it's exciting.
You felt very much in the original. And so making it skill based, that was the advantage that particular system had over Spider-Man, where you still get some saves, but in general, there's not really a huge penalty for not being able to swing, right? It's just more, it really feels good.
Richard B. asks, from your time at Capcom, do you know why the Maximo game series was made instead of pursuing a full 3D Ghost and Goblin series?
I would assume that was probably just a creative decision. They used the lead artist for the Famitsu covers. Matsushita-san, I think was his name. A lot of people liked his art, although there probably can be made an argument that it maybe wasn't perfect for the West. I think that you're in your armor, and then next thing you know, you're in your skivvies. There's already a basic comic element to the original games. And so I'm sure they were latching on to 2 or 3 of those core elements to come up with the design.
All right. Richter B. also asked, what do you think of Curse of the Moon, especially compared to something like Castlevania 3?
Curse of the Moon is awesome. Its pacing is awesome. Its bosses are awesome. The fact that it increases the lore for Bloodstained is also awesome. Inti really outdid themselves. Inti Creates is on fire right now when it comes to doing those 2D pixel remakes or world building games. So really awesome game. If you haven't played it, if I was the producer on it, I'd say one thing: $9.99 is too frigging cheap. Right now, the biggest thing destroying the indie market are themselves, because they keep undervaluing their content.
Yeah, that's a good point.
No game in this day and age should be $10 if you're able to play it for like 5 to 10 hours. I mean, people may complain over $5, but that's basically the cost of a Happy Meal. Really, indie games should be like $15. And if not, it's really an untenable market for a lot of different people.
Right, and I'm interested to see where this curation for indie games goes, because that's one of the problems, that you have all of these crap low quality games out there that it's hard to sift through and know what's actually worth giving your money to when you've already wasted $5 on a crap game. So
absolutely,
fair pricing that supports the industry. It's the price points that we see right now are kind of archaic. I remember wanting SNES games that cost so much more back then than any of the games that we play now, and inflation has happened. So
Phantasy Star 4 was like $100 or something close to that.
Yeah. We just we need to support the best games we can and those creators with our wallets, and play more games. So Richter B also says, is this what you expected the development timeline for Bloodstained might be given the scope of the project? And did you foresee having to move things away from Inti?
The Inti piece, no. The timeline piece, I did not know.
Okay.
Again, the way I think about Kickstarters now is it'll probably be at least an additional year, and I just do it and I fire and forget, and then later second Christmas comes. That's my own personal philosophy towards it.
So Richter B says, P.S. Ben, I'm still waiting on a new full 3D Bionic Commando 2. If you can pull some strings at Capcom, right? Have it be more mission-based, dropping Nathan from a helicopter, VTOL into diverse areas that have rewarding 3D grappling mechanics, Grin developed with a few more diverse kind of objectives, and he'd be a very happy gamer.
Yeah. Grin developed is going to be the challenge. Those the two brothers that ran that aren't seeing eye to eye anymore. So whenever brotherly love falls by the wayside, it gets a bit challenging. But I don't think there's a single movie director or creator out there that when they do something and they ended up missing the mark on a few things, don't wish they just had one more opportunity to do good on it. But never in life does that happen, unfortunately. Agreed. Many things, knowing what we know now about modern game design, could be baked into a new Bionic Commando, 3D Bionic Commando 2, and make it just like friggin' awesome. But I think that companies will forever look at the numbers and the math behind the games. And since the Bionic Commando 3D one didn't sell and was a loss for them as a project, I can totally see that never happening. Mm-hmm. Now, Bionic Commando 2.5D, I can see that happening. I could see maybe a Ghosts and Goblins game happening. I've seen people talking about Dino Crisis. That can probably happen. I can see a lot of old franchises coming back. Capcom's doing the Onimusha collection. They're doing the Resident Evil 2 remake. They're doing Devil May Cry 5. They're listening now. Capcom this last year has done nothing but impress me. And I'm just super happy for them as a publisher that they're where they should be. They're back in the fans' hearts. They're the last 5 years of them just not creating new things and just having really zany, wacky games that just, weren't fun. QTE Resident Evil 6 was like, what in the hell happened there? A lot of, like, all that now seems to be behind them. And I think the future looks bright for Capcom.
Awesome. So Aztec has some questions here. During the dawn of the HD generation, Japanese companies were struggling to find their footing with a few successes and many failures. But now the picture is very different, with multiple recent worldwide triumphs like Monster Hunter World, Nier Automata, Neo, Persona 5, Octopath, Dragon Ball, Fighter Z, Nintendo in general, and Dragon Quest XI, marking the return of the series to home consoles and even embracing the PC. What changed from the PS3 to the PS4 generation that influenced this positive change? Do you think we're seeing a Japanese game industry renaissance?
I think they're just going back to the basics. I think at one point they tried to chase what the Western trends were, and they failed over and over and over again. I mean, no offense, Japanese companies probably shouldn't be doing FPSs. In general, they shouldn't be doing open world games unless they're able to throw 100 million or 200 million at it, like Nintendo can, but like no other probably Japanese publisher can, because that's traditionally how much they cost to just try to get them up and running. So I think they've gone back to the basics. But, what I'm seeing from them is they finally adopted to the painful truth that not creating an internal engine for every game is not good. So the number of Japanese games using Unreal Engine 4 is like insane. I remember Capcom reviewed Unreal Engine 3 and like turned their nose at it. It was like, oh no, our internal engine's way better. But now, almost everybody's using Unreal Engine 4, and quite honestly, it's a much more efficient way to build a game. You can save tens of millions of dollars to do that. And so that's just smarter techniques. They're using more outsourcing, which is cheaper. Kojima-san is probably still using a $20,000 man-month person to create a crate, which probably isn't the most efficient use of money. But, at the end of the day, many evolutions have happened while them sticking to what I think their core strengths are. And that's why you're able to see what you're seeing these days, which is awesome. However, please understand that Western publishers most often do not look at a title as a success unless it's over 5 million units. So, Nier Automata is like, we've made 3 million units or whatever. And that's great for Square Enix, but that wouldn't make Activision happy. That wouldn't make probably Ubisoft happy. They want to have probably 10 million or more units. So I think that the Japanese industry is going to exist in a world where they can create games for budgets that if you sell 1 million to 3 million units, there's a lot of profit there.
I see. So Kojima's expensive crate guy, could you give a referral to Iga for that guy? Because don't underestimate how crates can be difficult to program. we had a crate boss in the beta that wasn't exactly intentional, but anyways, yeah. So Jan had a question. How involved are you with Iga at this point? Do you still work together?
Absolutely. Like I said, I saw him 3 weeks ago. I am probably one of the biggest fans of Iga on the planet. So wherever he goes with his next thing, I hope to be able to help him. I hope to be able to do whatever I can to make sure he is empowered and has as much creative freedom, because we need more good guys like him and less egomaniacs.
Yes, we need egomaniacs, not egomaniacs.
Yeah, but I'm pumped. That's a good one.
All right. Rengar ACS says, so Ben, what console do you think you'll be playing Bloodstained on the most? It'll probably be Switch for me. And I heard earlier you mentioned Switch too. So yeah,
that's right.
Especially because you travel so much, it's going to be nice to have in a portable way. So
if you live in Japan and you take as many Tokyo business trips or foreign business trips as I do, it's the Switch or bust.
Right. All right. So I asked you if you had any questions for the fans when you agreed to come on the show again, and you asked 3 interesting questions. We had almost 40 people giving detailed answers to your questions, so I can't do a proper shout out to everyone by name. And if we go deep on these responses, we could easily spend 2 more hours reading and commenting all of their responses. But I did get the highlights, so I know that you're really interested in this. It sounds like it's going to perhaps influence some of your Dangan stuff. But you ask, what are your favorite indie Metroidvanias? And first up, everyone wants to know favorite indie Metroidvanias. What's yours, Ben?
Hollow Knight. I loved Hollow Knight. Can't say enough about it. And the guys that made it are just incredibly nice dudes. So
cool. Well, the community also agreed. Hollow Knight was mentioned, and Rabby Ribby, which I guess was some kind of rabbit. It's very cutesy, very anime Japan stuff. But I was new to that until someone mentioned it. I had no idea what it was. Bunny Must Die, which is apparently also rabbit related. Ori and the Blind Forest, of course. A beautiful game. Yeah, Guacamelee, which I personally also enjoyed. I really like that one. I haven't played the second one yet. I really need to do that. But Guacamelee, that's a great Metroidvania. And seeing the way that he switches between worlds, man, that just works so well in a game like that I'm wondering if Bloodstained might throw something like that in there somehow. Yep. But Sundered, Dead Cells is super popular. It looks like a great game. Axiom Verge is still on people's mind, which big supporter of Tom Happ right here. A great indie dev, solo dev. Super Panda Adventures. I don't know anything about that one. Do you?
I do not.
Okay.
But I'll be able to look all these up. That's the best part.
Yeah. The 2014 Strider. That one did look good. Lots of jumping around.
Loved it. Yep, that was great. Cleared it.
A couple of people mentioned Lucard Chronicles 2. If you don't know what that is a fan-made Castlevania game that just does its own thing. And the first one was good. The second one is even better. It's got Robbie Belgray doing voice acting for Alucard in it. It's really cool. So if someone hasn't checked out Lucard Chronicles 2, you should check it out. Of course, Shantae, Half Genie Hero in there. All the Shantae stuff is great. I really liked Half Genie Hero.
Way Forward is an awesome company.
Yes, they are. Yeah, they're great. Cave Story, that's a classic indie right there. Great soundtrack too. Salt and Sanctuary, really popular with people. Dust and Elysian Tale. I played a bit of that, but the combos were kind of cool. The game just didn't resonate with me personally, but for those that like it, they really like it. So. Time Spinner, that's even got my wife's attention. I know that Purify Where Soul is looking forward to it. Time Spinner it should be on all of our radars. It looks really good. Okay. Aquaria, Song of the Deep, if that counts as a Metroidvania, which I think it does. We could get into a long discussion about what counts as a Metroidvania, but sure. Validus Story, Castle of Darkness, Risk of Rain. And even a couple of people mentioned Faxanadu, which did it get a remake or something? Because that's just a NES game. Maybe it's. I don't think it counts as indie, but because people might not be familiar with it, perhaps it's due for some more love.
Yep, totally possible.
But yes, there's the long list of the community's favorite indie Metroidvanias. If you'd like to just see that full list, that thread's out there on the forums. And people go into why they mentioned these and why they're their favorites. So there's lots of great discussion there. But the second question you asked was, how do you feel about new remakes and HD titles coming out recently? Yeah. So what's your opinion? Obviously, it'll be positive since you're pursuing something like that.
About remakes coming out?
Right. HD remakes and them in general.
So long as they don't do it on the cheap. In a lot of places, I mean, Final Fantasy VI, I'm talking to you.
6 or 7?
6.
I would love 6. I mean,
they made 6 already on mobile, and they redid the art. They made it look like flash art, right? So I'm talking about.
That's a re-release. That's more. Yeah, I guess. That game deserves so much love. I didn't even really give that any attention.
But I'm just saying. It matters if they're really going to spend money. I'm sure they cut every single corner they could to basically make that for probably a couple $100,000. And it shows. So if you're going to do any sort of a remake or an HD remake, my hopes are that people are going to spend, proper millions of dollars to redo the art and make it look pretty, because it's the art that's the most important thing whenever you're going to do a remake or something like that.
When you're looking at Amano's art, especially, you got to do it. You got to go 100% with that.
Absolutely.
Right. So the community, when they were asked, how do you feel about new remakes and HD titles coming out recently, they agreed that price point is important and the money put into it is also important. Here recently, the big news is Symphony and Rondo will be re-released for PlayStation digital only, and there's been a lot of disappointment that there's nothing new to it. It's just a re-release, and it's just digital PlayStation.
Yep. So exactly, this is one of those. It sounds like it's a cash grab. It sounds like it smacks of a licensing out person just saying, "Hey, let's license this out." And since that license out person is able to bring $100,000 into the company, he did his job well, and that's it. But it doesn't. It's not a connected company-wide strategy, hopefully, that speaks of let's focus on quality and really, really consider what our fans want, because no fan wants that. Bare minimum, there are things that you can do to adjust it and make it better, and you can still do it for fairly cheap. But I would assume that the code is old, and so for them to try and go in and adjust the code would have meant that it was a substantial financial investment. They just weren't going to. This was merely just, hey, let's get a little extra money on the side. Let's not actually reinvest in it. So
I'm glad you see it that way, because I think most of us do. But yeah, care and quality in being important to remakes was a big part of that conversation on the forums when asked this question. And some don't want to buy the same game twice unless there's a good reason to do so. But remakes are good for a new audience. That was brought up a lot. And some people think it's lazy and they'd rather have sequels rather than efforts going into a remake. And they mentioned a lot of good examples for positive remakes in HD titles. Katamari Damacy Reroll, Resident Evil 2, DuckTales Remastered. I heard it both ways for Zelda Twilight Princess. People liked it, some people didn't. Final Fantasy X and X2 HD Remastered was good. Radiant Historia, Perfect Chronology, and Kingdom Hearts were all mentioned as on the positive end, with a few bad examples mentioned of Silent Hill 2 and 3, Conker's Bad Fur Day, and everyone's kind of looking at Final Fantasy VII to see how that risk plays out.
Yep. I mean, it is a lot of money at the end of the day, and so I get the idea that they want something new, but don't forget that there's probably a whole strata of younger gamers who don't know those classics.
Right.
And so getting them to be able to enjoy the classics, that's not a bad thing either.
Right. That's one of the best things about Rondo getting re-released is a lot of people are going to play it now that haven't played it in the past. So if I didn't have my PSP version, then I probably never would have played it.
Exactly. And if people don't play it, then what happens is you do get stuck into modern genres, and publishers are going to chase the battle royale trend or whatever. And then I'm going to be stuck with my options or battle royale or FPS or all these other genres that I don't like. I like those older genres. And so quite honestly, it's nice to be able to have a younger fan base as well, get invigorated, inspired, and desire those sort of gameplay experiences.
Yeah, so on the forums, Galamoth has been with us and stays with us all the time. He's really great in the community, and he personally recommended that you try Radiant Historia Perfect Chronology and gave us a link if you haven't tried it. I could send you that.
Okay, I will do that. Is it not on the Switch? It's PC only, or PlayStation 4, 3? Older than that? Oh, I'll look it up.
Yeah, well, I'll send you the link. He's got a YouTube video here for you to check out. So cool. I'll give that to you. But all right, so the third and final question from you to the community was on remaking one non-Nintendo or Square Enix game from PS2 or earlier. So you said no comment from you. And then there's a long list from the community, and I'm just reading off a bunch of games, but everybody had reasons why they wanted to see these things. So there's a whole bunch of conversation regarding these decisions about what their remake wishes would be. So we had the Sonic Adventure games, Breath of Fire 3. So the Breath of Fire gets a lot of love. So I guess 3 holds a special spot in someone's heart, like Final Fantasy 3 or 6 does for us.
Absolutely.
Silent Hill 1, Captain Claw, Cold Fear, Alone in the Dark, A New Nightmare, Time Splitters, Dragon Spirit, The Thing, which is interesting because John Carpenter considers the Thing game kind of a real sequel to the movie. Magic Sword, I think that's an arcade game. Yep. Summoner.
Manami Matsumae-san, who did the music for Mighty No. 9, also did the music for Magic Sword. by the way. Anyways, keep going.
I will have to check that out. Yeah, I love game music. Summoner, have you
I know of it.
Summoner?
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
good. Jumping Flash, but for VR. Infamous, Devil Dice, Castlevania 64. That's interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting.
Eternal Poison, Ultima 1 through 5 in the Ultima 6 engine. That might be cool.
Yep.
Mystical Ninja, Castlevania Curse of Darkness. That I personally would like, because I missed out on Lament and Curse just because of availability on the systems I had at the time. So I'd actually like to see that. But only if they get Iga involved, of course. And then directly after that, someone else said Symphony of the Night, and they had a pretty long explanation about, what could be different in a remake, not just doing the same thing again. Xenogears, Metal Gear 1 and 2 from the MSX, Alundra 1 and 2, Silent Bomber, Shadow's Hearts was mentioned a couple of times. Twisted Metal 2, that was a good game. I enjoyed that. They'd probably just make a sequel, though. I don't know why it'd be a remake of 2. Probably a tribute. But Devil May Cry 2, new Devil May Cry game coming out. So maybe they just want to see 2 get some more love. Dino Crisis, I think you mentioned that earlier in the show.
I did.
Digimon World 2003. Demon's Crest, that's an interesting one. Getsu Fumaden. Aliens vs. Predator Extinction. I like Aliens. I like Predator. When you mix the two, I don't know, but there was a Jaguar game that was Aliens versus Predator. That's pretty cool. So yeah, those games are always kind of interesting. But Dragon Quest Complete Collection, just remake it all. Final Fantasy VIII getting some love in there. They're probably going to have to see how Final Fantasy VII would play out before they continue to remake old Final Fantasies, though.
Well, even if they do that, what is going to be 15 years from now, so I may be dead.
Right. It'll be for a different generation. We'll be long gone. But or it'll be made in total virtual reality, plugged into the Matrix. Dragon Ball Z GT Final Bout, wanting a remake for that. The Guardian Legend, Okagi Shadow King, The Legend of Dragoon, Skies of Arcadia, Dragon Force, Battle of Olympus, and finally Wild Arms 2. So you can take the previous question about how people feel about remakes, and if there's anything negative about it, just look at the list of games that people really want to see get some love in the modern age. So yeah, I think that despite some of the challenges that come along, as long as the care and the quality is put into it, it's got a good price point, make it make sense to re-release. There's actually a lot of support for HD remakes and titles. So,
well, I got some good news. 1 or 2 of the games on the list may in fact be one of the things I'm working on, and 1 or 2 games on the list may in fact be something that I know is in development right now. So,
sir, you're a wish granter.
I'm going to try to be a wish granter, but the other part is going to be just good luck happening. So anyways, good news is you people all have really good sensibilities. So hopefully we can get even more and more of those out there.
It was the Castlevania games, wasn't it? No, I won't pick and pry.
Not telling.
All right. Well, you didn't say no. He didn't say no, guys. No. Well, Ben, I've taken up quite a bit of your time. I really appreciate every time that you come back, every October. It seems to be our best tradition in the community. So thank you once again, man. You're always welcome here. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. Is there anything you want to wrap up with?
Again, just last minute, for those of you who are interested maybe in premium board games, do check out Kingdom Death Monster. It has been an incredibly addicting experience for myself and my friends. We've probably put in about 200 hours. It is so much fun, but not cheap. For anybody who is interested in indie games, one more time, our Twitter, Dangan_ENT. Please join the group, join us on Discord. If anybody sees any really interesting indie titles that they're like, you should really look at this, this is awesome, feel free to let Mike know, and then Mike can ping me at any time.
Awesome. All right, yeah, and I'll leave links in the descriptions. I know it can be hard for a podcast, but this is on YouTube too, so you can at least click it there. But I'll try to include as many links as I can. Just look for those. But yes, until we see you again, man. Hopefully the next time you come on the show, we'll already be playing Bloodstained.
Beating the game. That's right. Absolutely.
Right. That's it. We thought that last year, but this would be the year for sure. I hope you have a happy Halloween. Spread that Halloween love over there to Japan. It's my favorite holiday. So everyone enjoy their Halloween season, and we will see you on the forums. Bye, everybody.
Right. Thanks a lot. Bye, guys.
Bye, man.